The galaxy stretched endlessly through space, filled with countless stars and worlds, but it had become a quiet place. For millions of years, great civilizations had risen to incredible heights, then settled into comfortable routines. The Ashanti were beings made of living crystal who could shape pure energy into beautiful cities that floated between stars. The Nephilim lived in vast oceans and could sing songs that bent the laws of physics, creating wonders with their voices. Alone, the ethereals were ghost-like creatures who could step in and out of different dimensions as easily as walking through a door. All of these ancient peoples had achieved everything they thought possible long ago. Now they spent their time quietly managing their small collections of perfect worlds, thinking deep thoughts and enjoying the peace they had earned. The galaxy had become like a retirement home for gods, where everyone was content to rest and remember their glory days. Then, in the year 2387, everything changed. Commander Li Huan sat in the pilot seat of humanity's first faster-than-light spaceship, watching strange stars appear on his screen as the ship emerged from the Kepler Gateway. His hands were steady on the controls, but his heart was racing. Behind him, his crew of 12 humans stared out the windows at their first glimpse of the wider galaxy. They were seeing sights that no human had ever seen before. The ship's communication system crackled to life. Voices and languages they had never heard began speaking to them, welcoming them to something called the Galactic Assembly. Within hours, they found themselves being guided to a massive space station orbiting a star that burned with colors that hurt to look at directly. The established powers of the galaxy noticed these newcomers, but not in the way humans might have hoped. To the ancient species, humans looked like nothing special at all. They lived for less than 100 years, which seemed like a few heartbeats to beings who had existed for thousands of years. Their technology was simple and crude compared to the wonders the galaxy had seen. They had no special powers, could not sing matter into new shapes, could not walk through walls, could not build with pure thought. The official records of the Galactic Assembly classified humanity as Species 847C, low expansion potential. The evaluators predicted that humans would probably colonize 3 or 4 worlds, maybe develop some basic space trade, and then settle into the same peaceful routine that every other species had eventually chosen. It was the natural way of things in the galaxy. Dr. Kim Sola was Earth's first xenobiologist, a woman who had spent her entire life dreaming of meeting alien life. Now she stood in the crystal halls of Ashanti Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Assembly, surrounded by beings so advanced they seemed like magic. The walls around her were made of living crystal that hummed with power and shifted colors as thoughts passed through them. Creatures of light floated past her, and beings that looked like walking water discussed matters in voices that sounded like music. She felt very small and very human in that place, but she tried to hide her nervousness as she addressed the assembled representatives. "We're honored to join this great community," she said, speaking into a device that somehow translated her words into dozens of different types of communication at once. Some species heard her words as sound, others felt them as vibrations, and still others perceived them as patterns of light or changes in electromagnetic fields. The Ashanti elder who served as the current assembly speaker was a tower of blue crystal that rose 20 feet into the air. When it responded, its voice came not as sound, but as ripples of energy that passed through the crystal walls and floors, creating a harmony that made Sola's bones vibrate. The translation device rendered its words into simple human speech. "Welcome, brief-lived ones. Perhaps you will find peace among the stars, as we have." The other representatives made similar welcoming sounds, but Sola could hear something else in their voices, something the translation device could not capture. It was the tone that adults used when speaking to children who were playing at being grown-ups kind, but not really taking them seriously. As the formal ceremony ended and the representatives began to drift away, Sola heard fragments of conversation in the few alien languages she had started to learn. The words she caught made her face burn with embarrassment and anger. They were talking about humanity the way people might discuss a new species of butterfly that had been discovered. Mildly interesting, but ultimately insignificant. But as Dr. Kim Sola stood there in those crystal halls, surrounded by beings who had built wonders beyond imagination, and then chosen to rest, she felt something that none of them had felt in a very long time. She felt hungry, not for food, but for more. More worlds, more challenges, more impossibilities to make possible. She looked out through the crystal walls at the galaxy spread before them, and she did not see a peaceful retirement home. She saw a universe full of empty spaces waiting to be filled. Peace was not what humanity had come to find among the stars. The changes began slowly, then happened all at once. In the first 5 years after joining the Galactic Assembly, humans did exactly what everyone expected them to do. They found a few nice planets with good weather and clean water, built some basic colonies, and started families. The ancient species nodded approvingly and went back to their peaceful activities, thinking the humans had learned their proper place in the galaxy. But then something strange started happening. Human ships kept launching from Earth, heading to new star systems every few months. At first, the assembly thought this was normal exploration, the kind of curiosity that young species usually showed before settling down. But the ships did not just explore, they stayed, and they built things. By the 10th year, humans had colonies in 20 star systems. By the 20th year, it was 40 systems. The established species began to take notice, but they were not worried yet. Humans were just being enthusiastic, they thought. They would slow down soon enough, when they realized how hard it was to maintain so many distant settlements. They did not slow down, Captain. Park Jinu stood on the bridge of the construction ship New Horizon, looking out at a world that no other species would have even considered visiting. The planet below them was a nightmare of toxic storms and acid rain, with an atmosphere that could melt metal. Radiation from the nearby star was so intense that most species would die within minutes of landing. The official assembly survey had labeled it Hostile World 447, unsuitable for any known form of life. Humans had been living there for 3 years. How are the underground cities coming along? Park asked his engineering officer, Lieutenant Nam Kira. Population just hit 50,000, she replied, checking her datapad. The thermal generators are working better than expected. We might actually be ahead of schedule on the surface domes. Park smiled. When other species found a good planet, they built 1 or 2 cities and called it home. When humans found a good planet, they did the same thing. But when humans found a terrible planet that nobody else wanted, they saw it as a challenge to be solved. The worse the world, the more excited human engineers seemed to get about finding ways to live there. The Nephilim, with their beautiful voices and water cities, had tried to be helpful. They had given humans detailed lists of which star systems were safe for colonization, and which ones should be avoided. Humans thanked them politely, then immediately started building settlements in all the places the Nephilim had said were too dangerous. The burning sector was the perfect example. It was a region of space filled with radiation from dying stars, where solar winds could strip the atmosphere from a planet in a few thousand years. The Nephilim had visited it once, millions of years ago, taken careful measurements, and declared it completely unsuitable for any form of civilization. When Captain Park announced that humans were building industrial complexes there, the Nephilim thought he was joking. When they realized he was serious, they were horrified. When they sent a diplomatic mission to see these complexes for themselves, they found thriving human settlements with populations in the millions, using the deadly radiation as a power source for their factories. But why? Asked the Nephilim ambassador, her voice creating ripples of confusion in the water around her. There are so many safe worlds to choose from. Why risk your lives in such terrible places? The human engineer, who was giving her the tour shrugged, because it was there, and nobody else wanted it. Seemed like a waste to leave it empty. This was the kind of thinking that made the ancient species uncomfortable. They had long ago learned to work with the universe, to find the places where life was easy and build their civilizations there. Humans seemed to prefer working against the universe, taking the places where life was impossible, and forcing it to be possible anyway. The real crisis began when Captain Park Jinu made an announcement that shocked the entire Galactic Assembly. Humans wanted to build something around the star Corvash 7, not just a space station or a mining platform, but a complete stellar engineering array that would surround the entire star with machinery. The problem was that Corvash 7 was located in ethereal sacred space. The ghostly ethereals had been using that star system for meditation and spiritual contemplation for over 10,000 years. It was one of their most holy places, and they had never allowed any other species to even visit there. The assembly called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the crystal halls, their voices filling the space with sounds of disbelief and concern. The project humans were proposing was not just difficult or expensive. According to every expert who had studied such things, it was completely impossible. Your species lacks the fundamental understanding of stellar mechanics, declared the assembly speaker, an ancient Ashanti whose crystal body glowed with authority. Even if all our civilizations worked together, such a project would take 1,000,000 years to complete. Captain Park Jinu stood before the assembled representatives, looking very small and very human among all those ancient, powerful beings. He listened politely to their explanations of why his plan could not work, nodding respectfully as they shared their wisdom gained over millions of years of experience. When they finished, he smiled and said, "We appreciate your expertise, but construction begins next month. We estimate completion in 12 years. The silence that followed was unlike anything the assembly halls had ever heard. The ships arrived at Corvash 7 6 months after Captain Park's announcement, carrying official observers from every major species in the Galactic Assembly. They came, expecting to witness a disaster, to document the moment when humanity finally learned the hard lesson that the universe had limits. The ancient species had seen this pattern before with younger civilizations. They would attempt something impossible, fail spectacularly, and then settle into the quiet acceptance that marked true galactic maturity. The ethereal observer called Whisper Vein Shensoro drifted through space in its translucent form, approaching what it expected to find as either an empty system or a graveyard of broken human ships. Instead, it encountered something that made its ancient consciousness recoil in confusion. The entire star system buzzed with activity unlike anything the galaxy had seen in millions of years. Thousands of human vessels moved around Corvash 7 in patterns so complex they seemed almost alive. Each ship was different from the others, as if humans were building their fleet while they worked, instead of following some predetermined plan. Massive construction platforms had been assembled in stable orbit around the dying star, and streams of raw materials flowed between them in carefully controlled rivers of metal and energy. Engineer Chomina hung suspended in the vacuum of space, her environmental suit's thrusters keeping her position near a construction site that should not have been possible. Around her, human workers installed collectors designed to harvest energy directly from stellar radiation. According to everything the ethereals knew about physics, such collectors could not exist. The materials required would melt instantly when exposed to a star's output, and the energy flows would create feedback loops that would tear apart any containment system. Yet there they were, not only functioning, but working better than the humans had originally planned. Status report on Sector 7. Mina spoke into her suit's communication system, watching as another massive collector array locked into position around a section of the star's surface. "All green," came the reply from the construction coordinator. "We're actually running ahead of schedule. The new hedge-resistant alloys are performing 30% better than projected." Mina nodded, then activated her suit's maneuvering system to float over to the next installation point. As she moved, she became aware of something following her. She turned to see a shimmering, barely visible form that looked like it was made of starlight and shadow. "You are the ethereal observer," she said, recognizing the being from the briefings she had received about expected visitors. "Whisper of ancient sorrow, correct?" The ethereal's form flickered with what the translation device rendered as deep confusion. "How?" it whispered, its voice like wind through empty spaces. "Your species has existed for mere moments in galactic time. We have studied stellar mechanics for 50,000 years. The collectors you are installing should not be able to function. The physics are impossible." Mina secured her position near the installation point and began running diagnostic checks on the equipment. "That's your problem right there," she said, not looking up from her work. "You studied it. We're just doing it." The ethereal's form pulsed with distress, but the mathematical models clearly show that such technology cannot exist. "We have run simulations for millennia. Every calculation proves that direct stellar energy collection at this scale will result in catastrophic failure." "Yeah, we ran the same calculations," Mina replied, connecting quantum conduits that every textbook in the galaxy said would collapse instantly under the energy loads they were designed to carry. "They said it was impossible to. So we built it anyway and figured out how to make it work while we were building it." Before the ethereal could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the construction site. Emergency lights flashed on every ship and platform as sensors detected something that sent panic through the crews of the observer vessels. A massive solar flare was erupting from Corvash 7, a wall of superheated plasma and radiation that was rushing toward them at incredible speed. The observer ships immediately began emergency retreat procedures. Such flares could destroy entire fleets instantly, and every species in the galaxy knew that the only sensible response was to run as fast and as far as possible until the danger passed. The human ships did not retreat. Instead, they moved closer to the star. Mina's voice came over the communication channels, calm and professional even as the sensors showed radiation levels that should have been instantly lethal. "All units, we're reconfiguring for flare collection. This is exactly what we designed the collectors for. Redirect all non-essential power to the harvesting arrays, and prepare for energy storage at maximum capacity." The ethereal watched in horror as the human construction fleet flew directly into the path of the solar flare. It expected to witness the destruction of thousands of human lives. A tragedy that would finally teach this young species the respect for cosmic forces that all mature civilizations learned. Instead, the human collectors opened like flowers blooming in the face of the sun. They caught the flare's energy and channeled it into their construction systems, using the star's own fury to power their work. In the 6 hours that the flare lasted, the humans accomplished more construction than they had in the previous 3 months. When it was over, Engineer Mina was still at her post, now installing components that glowed with stored stellar energy. The moment the Corvash array came online, every energy sensor in 17 star systems registered the same impossible reading. A wave of perfectly organized power swept outward from the dying star. Not the chaotic destruction that stellar engineering usually produced, but something clean and controlled and beautiful. The energy pulse reached distant worlds and space stations, carrying with it a message that no words could have delivered. The impossible had just become real. On the crystal world of Ashanti Prime, a young engineer named Crystalline Heart of New Thoughts felt the energy wave pass through the planet's core. For the first time in her 300-year life, she stood up in the Council of Elders and spoke words that had not been heard in their civilization for 10,000 years. "We could build a city ship," she said, her crystal form glowing with excitement that made the older Ashanti uncomfortable. "A living crystal construct the size of a moon, capable of traveling between galaxies. I have calculated the energy requirements, and with the human stellar engineering techniques, it would be possible. The elder who remembers all things hummed with disapproval, sending vibrations through the crystal floor that translated as ancient wisdom. Young one, we abandoned such dreams long ago. They are beautiful fantasies, but the universe has shown us that some things cannot be achieved. We have learned to find peace in accepting our limitations. But what if our limitations were wrong? Crystal in Heart of New Thoughts replied, her words causing several younger Ashanti to glow brighter with interest. The humans just built a stellar array that our greatest minds said was impossible. What if we stopped accepting limitations and started questioning them instead? Similar conversations were happening throughout the galaxy. In the deep ocean cities of the Nephilim homeworld, explorer crews that had been idle for centuries suddenly found themselves overwhelmed with volunteers for missions to investigate cosmic regions that had been declared too dangerous to visit. The Great Void, a region of empty space between spiral arms where no stars shone, had been avoided by every species for millions of years. Now young Nephilim sang of diving into that darkness to discover what secrets it might hold. The most surprising change came from the ethereals, the ancient ghost-like beings who had spent the last 50,000 years in quiet meditation. Their representative Whisper Vainchant Sorrow had returned from observing the Corvash array with disturbing news. The humans had not just succeeded in their impossible project, they had made it look easy. In the dimensional spaces where ETH gathered to share thoughts, new ideas began to flow for the first time in ETH. Projects that had been dismissed as beyond physical reality were suddenly being reconsidered. Young ethereals proposed creating stable doorways between dimensions, building structures that existed in multiple realities at once, and exploring the deep spaces between universes that had always been considered unreachable. Admiral Song Hyun stood on the bridge of humanity's newest achievement, watching the stars streak past in patterns that should have been impossible. The ship she commanded was not just traveling faster than light, it was building other ships while it traveled. Mobile construction yards had always been considered a fantasy, because the energy requirements and engineering challenges were too great to solve. But humans had looked at the problem and decided that the real challenge was not whether it could be done, but how quickly they could figure out how to do it. The bridge around her buzzed with activity as her crew managed systems that most species would have needed entire planets to house. Construction bays built new vessels using materials gathered from the cosmic dust they passed through. Assembly lines created components for projects that were still being designed. The ship was not just a vessel, it was a factory, a research station, and a city, all in one. Admiral, we're receiving communication requests from the Galactic Assembly, reported Commander Lee Jun from his position at the communications station. All major species want to speak with you simultaneously. Songhan activated the quantum communication array that allowed her to speak instantly across any distance. The screen filled with representatives from dozens of species, their forms flickering as the signal reached across thousands of light years. We're not trying to replace your civilizations, she said, her words traveling through communication networks that had not existed 5 years earlier but now connected every corner of the galaxy. We're not trying to show you up or prove that we're better than you. We're trying to remind you what you're capable of becoming. The response surprised her. Instead of the usual polite dismissal or concerned warnings about humanity's reckless ambitions, she heard something different in their voices. She heard hunger. When Songhin announced humanity's next project, the reaction was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Artificial wormhole networks that would link distant galaxies, allowing instant travel across millions of light years, should have been met with the same dismissal that had greeted every other human project. Instead, 3 different species immediately volunteered to collaborate. The Ashanti offered their expertise in energy manipulation. The Nephilim provided their knowledge of quantum harmonics. Even the ethereals agreed to share their understanding of dimensional mechanics. For the first time in galactic history, the ancient species were not just watching a younger civilization. attempt the impossible. They were joining them. The fire that humans had lit was spreading, and the galaxy would never be the same. Fleet Admiral Yoon Dae pressed her hand against the observation window of the infinite horizon and watched the galaxy spread out below her like a map of lights. But this was not the same galaxy that humans had first encountered 75 years ago. That galaxy had been quiet and dark, with only the natural glow of stars and the occasional space station marking where ancient civilizations had built their small, careful homes. Now, the Milky Way blazed like a festival of impossible dreams made real. Streams of artificial light connected star systems in patterns that looked almost like art. Ring worlds spun around binary stars, their surfaces glowing with cities that housed billions of beings from dozens of different species. Stellar engines, massive constructs that could move entire star systems like ships, created slow rivers of light as they carried solar systems to new locations where they were needed more. Most amazing of all were the dimensional gateways, structures that folded space itself like paper, allowing instant travel between points that were thousands of light years apart. They appeared as shimmering tears in reality, beautiful and terrifying at the same time, proof that the universe could be bent to serve the will of beings who refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. Status report from all departments. Admiral Yoon called to her bridge crew, though she could not take her eyes away from the view outside. She was looking at the result of 3/4 of a century of humans refusing to accept the word impossible. And it was more beautiful than any natural wonder she had ever seen. Engineering reports all systems optimal, replied Commander Lee Jun, checking his displays with the calm efficiency that had become the hallmark of human space crews. His great-grandfather had been Lee Wan, the pilot of humanity's first faster-than-light vessel, and the family tradition of pushing boundaries had continued through 3 generations. Around the bridge, the crew included not just humans, but representatives from 30 different species, all working together on systems that would have been considered divine fantasy when humans first joined the Galactic Assembly. A young Ashanti engineer monitored energy flows through crystalline conduits that channeled power from distant stars. A Nephilim navigator sang quantum coordinates into existence, her voice creating the mathematical relationships that would guide their ship across the void between galaxies. Even an ethereal technician flickered in and out of different dimensions as it fine-tuned the ship's reality engines. The Infinite Horizon itself was humanity's greatest achievement yet. A vessel designed not just to travel between galaxies, but to survive the journey across the empty space that separated island universes of stars. It was a city, a factory, a research station, and a gateway all combined into one impossible structure that somehow managed to function perfectly. Final systems check complete, reported the Ashanti engineer, her crystalline form glowing with satisfaction. All stellar collectors are functioning at 112% of designed capacity. The quantum engines are stable across all dimensional frequencies. We are ready for intergalactic transit. Admiral Yoon nodded and activated the ship's communication system to address the crew throughout the massive vessel. Attention all hands. This is Admiral Yoon. In 30 minutes, we will begin our journey to the Andromeda Galaxy. We go not as conquerors, but as teachers and students. We carry with us the combined knowledge and dreams of 30 species, and we go to share those dreams with whatever civilizations we may find in that distant galaxy. She paused, looking once more at the transformed Milky Way outside. 7 years ago, when humans first joined the galactic community, we found a universe that had grown quiet and content. Ancient species had achieved great things, then settled into comfortable routines, believing they had reached the limits of what was possible. Today, we leave behind a galaxy that burns with the light of impossible dreams made real, where every species has remembered what it means to reach for something beyond their grasp. Through the ship's speakers, she could hear the sounds of beings from dozens of worlds working together, their different languages and communication methods, creating a harmony that no single species could have produced alone. It was the sound of a universe that had learned to dream again. Initiating intergalactic transit, Commander Lee announced, his hands moving across controls that would have mystified the greatest engineers of any species a century earlier. The infinite horizon began to move, not just through space, but through the layers of reality itself. Using technologies that combined human determination with alien wisdom to achieve something that had never been attempted before. As they crossed the rim of the galaxy, Admiral Yoon felt the familiar sensation of a boundary being broken, another impossible thing becoming possible through the simple act of refusing to accept limitations. Behind them, the Milky Way continued to blaze with artificial light. A galaxy where civilizations that had once been content with small achievements now built wonders that spanned solar systems. Ahead lay the Andromeda Galaxy, dark and quiet, its own ancient civilizations, probably settled into the same comfortable routine that the Milky Way species had once accepted, but not for much longer. Humans were coming, and they carried with them something more powerful than any weapon or technology. They carried the absolute conviction that impossible simply meant nobody had tried hard enough yet. The stars had been lifeless until humans set them burning, and now that fire was spreading. Beyond the galaxy itself,